years, I was a advisor to Commissioner Alvaro Bedoya at the Federal Trade Commission. And Alvaro, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, this is Alvaro Bedoya. I was a commissioner at the Federal Trade Commission before the president shit canned me, and the ensuing legal drama continues. Yeah, so just for folks starting to log in, and I'm getting a little bit of an echo. I don't know.
Nope,
Oh, I know what it is.
it's taken care of.
Excellent.
Yep,
Thank you, my friend.
I closed out of the live.
So for folks who may be joining us now, let me just quickly explain what we're doing today and kind of the broader picture of what Max and I are working on. When Max and I left the FTC and started figuring out, what are we going to do next? One thing we thought a lot about was how there's a lot of media out there that's coming from the right. There's a lot of media out there that's coming from the left. There's not a lot of media that talks about the top versus the rest. Versus regular people, regular small business owners, independent family farmers, that kind of thing. And so we decided to focus not on left versus right, but having a show that talked about the conflict between the top and everyone else. And we want that to be a fair fight. So we're spinning up a show called The Fair Fight. And we're actually working on some great pilot episodes right now. One of them has to do with workplace surveillance. We will be hosting the extraordinary Jennifer Abruzzo, one of the country's top labor lawyers. I would say the top labor lawyer in our country. She was general counsel of the National Labor Relations Board. And that episode is about your boss spying at you at work, your boss tracking you through GPS, your boss scanning your iris, your boss recording your phone calls if you work in a call center, scanning your body if you work on a lot in Hollywood. And we are soliciting questions. We're actually doing a final round of that. We actually have some great questions about call centers, about folks at construction sites, about folks in plant nurseries. But last call, if you have a question about your boss spying at you at work, tracking you at work, submit a question today, right now, at thefairfightpod.com. Record it there, and then we will try to do our best to feature it on the show. And at the end of this, I will talk about the next. We're also working on an episode about agriculture, and my hope is to do an episode on social media and chatbots a little bit in time for Valentine's Day, which is a very sad thing, but unfortunately, a lot of people are falling in love and marrying their chatbots. And so those are the kind of oh yeah, man. And people think they have kids with their chatbots, and they log on to spend time with their kids. It is completely bananas.
It's Brave New World, man. It's just like
it's a sad new world.
It's a sad new world.
And so those are the big media episodes that we are working on in the background. We hope to bring those to you in a couple weeks. But in the meantime, we're throwing up some hangouts, doing some lives, talking about what's happening today. And so, Max, while I just push out the links on X and elsewhere, do you want to tell folks what we're going to talk about today?
So, obviously, this has been a very eventful week. Coming out of the holiday break, I was kind of hoping we'd have a little bit of a lull in news. But of course, this past week has had some of the most, in many ways, disheartening news. But when Alvaro and I were talking about doing this live, we were thinking about the events in Venezuela, where Maduro was captured, by the U.S. government and extradited to the United States to face charges. There seems to be some indications that Donald Trump wants to take over and run the oil in Venezuela. But then also earlier this week, there was the death of an American citizen at the hands of ICE in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this certainly seems to be a flashpoint in our culture and in our political environment right now, as people are vehemently disagreeing with each other about it. But what Alvaro and I want to do is take a few minutes to talk about these two events, probably focus more on Minneapolis, and if we can get to Venezuela, great. But in talking about Minneapolis, this kind of lays bare. I know people want to talk about the actual events and what happened, that led to the death of Nicole Good. But what we want to focus on is, how did we get here? How did we get to ICE on the streets? And what role did the oligarchy, what role did concentrated economic power play in leading to this? So I want to remind everyone, there's basically two presidential speeches in history that I think were so important and that people often forget. One is George Washington, when his farewell address, warning against us falling into a two-party system. I always find that one ironic, Alvaro, because our Constitution basically requires there to be a two-party system. But then the other one was Dwight D. Eisenhower, who, a general in World War II, seeing firsthand all of the decimation of war and what it does to populations and what effect it has on society, he warned against something called the military industrial complex. And I wish I could give you an exact verbatim what it means and all of that, but essentially and people can feel free to comment, correct me if I'm wrong on this. But essentially what it comes down to is we have to be worried about having an apparatus that actually that people profit off of for going to war. People have also noted that in the last few years, it's become the prison industrial complex, right? We have an incentive to put people in prison because there are all these companies that are making money off of the incarceration of American citizens. And what I think we can see in the last year of funding for ICE, Alvaro, is that now we have the deportation industrial complex, right? That there are all these companies who are financially profiting off of having ICE on our streets, right? All the contracts. Robert Reich posted yesterday a list of all the different countries that have, or countries, sorry, all the different companies that have profited off of the military industrial or the deportation industrial complex. They have contracts with ICE, firms like Amazon, certain banks. These are the ones, Alvaro, I don't know if you've got that tweet up or if you can, I'm trying to pull it up here, but
Yeah, I have it here. It's so Robert Reich was talking about the different companies, and he goes through Amazon, AT&T, Booz Allen, Charter Communications, Comcast, Dell, Ecolab, FedEx, General Dynamics, L3 Harris, Motorola, Thermo Fisher, UPS, etc.
So going back over the last year of funding history that led to this massive increase in ICE presence on our streets. You had the first appropriation back in March, and I don't know if you remember, Alvaro, but that was where there was the threat of the shutdown. I mean, that was right around the
Yeah,
time that you were, as you say,
yeah,
shit canned by the president. You know, that there was a threat of a shutdown, right? And of
yeah,
course, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats were like, "Oh, we're not so sure." But that included I believe it was a $500 million increase to ICE's appropriation. And there were a number of Democrats who actually switched over to support that. And that in not they were like, we don't like the increase, right? But we're afraid of what a shutdown would do to this country and
right.
all that. Well, so at that point in time, the biggest lobbyists, for that, passage of that 500 increase were these private prison companies that actually provide
Yeah,
the facilities
yeah,
for any migrant who is here who has been set for deportation,
yeah.
filling all those beds, right? That's a lot of money that is
It is a
flowing
lot
to
of money.
private companies and that they have an interest. So you have that first round of appropriations, but then you have the one big beautiful bill, right? The
Right.
OBBB.
Yep.
And that increased ICE's funding something to the tune of $28 billion per year, an absolutely absurd amount of money that is going to increase ICE's budget and their ability to do it. Companies from all industries supported that one big beautiful bill. And while
Yeah.
many hesitated to say that it was for ICE specifically,
Yeah.
they certainly were willing to make a moral compromise, right,
Yeah.
on the fact that this would, there were other aspects of one big beautiful bill that would benefit them. And so they were willing to look the other way about this increase of a massive, in many ways unaccountable force on America's streets.
So for me, when I look at what's happened to ICE, here's what I worry about. I worry that people solely focus on the horror that's playing out in Minneapolis, the horror that's playing out in Portland, um, and they don't understand how we got here. And they don't understand the choices that led us to get here. And so, what I want to point out is what else could be happening right now with this massive influx of money. And so, as you said, we had this $500 million bump up for ICE, but then you had, and I think it was over a number of years. So I think the total number for DHS was roughly $75 billion in increased funding. And just yesterday, there was a great example of how else we could be using this money. Because in New York, Mayor Zohran Mamdani and Governor Kathy Hochul unveiled the start of a plan to provide universal child care for kids in New York City and New York State more generally. And Governor Hochul is going to allocate, I think, 1.7 billion, out the gate. And there's going to be another 4.5 billion.
That's like
allocated.
Change you find in your couch in the government terms, right?
So there's roughly $5 billion coming out of the gate, and initially it's going to be like 100,000 kids that are helped, and then there's going to be the very initial focus will be on getting 2-year-olds in New York City to get free and full childcare. I think Governor Hochul was talking about 100,000 new or 2,000 new slots for childcare in New York City, and depending on how you calculate it, it comes out to roughly like $36,000 per kid, $50,000 per kid, $25,000 per kid, which as a parent who was paid for childcare, $25,000 per kid is very reasonable and very much a price you might end up paying for childcare as a family. And so just stop and think. People online are debating what happened on the streets of Minneapolis. I have an opinion. You have an opinion. But the only reason that happened was that this administration flooded 2,000 ICE agents into the streets of that city. Yep. And how else could they have been using that money? They could be using that money to provide free childcare for 1 million 2-year-olds across this country, and to alleviate some of the despair that people experience, young parents experience, when they've got young kids at home and they have someone who is, and they have 2 parents working. One of the most alienating aspects of becoming a young parent is looking around yourself and seeing, hey, wow, if I were a senior citizen, I wouldn't, depending on where I live, I might not even have to pay property taxes. If I were a senior citizen, X and Y and Z would be subsidized. If I were a company, I would be receiving, one of these massive corporations, I'd be receiving all these tax breaks. I'd be able to pay $0 in taxes. But right now, me and Seema had to do this absurd calculation where we were like, does it make sense for Seema to work? Or is all she's doing simply going to work to pay for someone to pay for our children? And we are an upper middle class and family in Maryland. A lot less fortunate families, could have been helped by the money that was allocated to these ICE agents and DHS agents and CBP agents. And here's the thing that I hate and the bubble I want to pop about this. Okay? There are some things I like about me. There are things I don't like about me. One of the things I'm not super a fan of is that I've lived in the orbit of Washington, D.C. for almost 19 years. Okay? But here's the benefit that gives me. Because always when you have these fights about funding, people say, oh, Alvaro, it's not, it's not that simple. You said $75 billion for ICE agents. You're saying you could spend it on childcare. It's not that simple. It's not. Let me tell you, I've been in every single one of those rooms. I've been in all the rooms in Congress where these decisions are made. I've been on the floor of the Senate. I've been in the negotiating rooms in Congress. I've been at the White House. I've been at the Situation Room. I've met all the senators. You know what I mean? Like, I have interacted with many of these people. I had to sit in a room with Ted Cruz and Stephen Miller, every Thursday for years on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I have been in all those rooms. It is that simple. It is that simple. When we decide to spend $75 billion on this, unfortunately, well, I don't know what you want to call it, this poorly trained, brand new police force, and you should talk about why people are taking these jobs. Like, what do you think is going to happen? And then just stop and think. Here's the last thing I want to say about this, which is The other thing people say is, oh, it's not that simple. You can't just take $75 billion, that's for this, and send it the other way, like states administer this, blah, blah, blah. We live in a time when we have a president who does whatever the heck he wants. He is that bull in the china shop. Stop and think for a second what life would look like if that bull in the china shop were actually trying to make life easier for you. If he was like, you know what, we're going to spend $75 billion and we're just going to take care of all your kids. We're going to pay for all of it, right? As opposed to we're going to put armed, masked, unidentified agents on your street that are going to pull a gun on you at a moment's notice.
And nobody is asking, how do you pay for it? Like whenever we talk about a good social program that is actually going to help people, that inevitable response is, well, how are you going to pay for it? You're just going to increase our taxes. You're going to do all that. But the truth is, okay, I mean, I could go many different places here, but every time that the government allocates, the federal government, this doesn't apply to state governments, this only applies to the federal government, right? The federal government creates the money, right? Now, increased spending can have a negative impact on inflation, right? But in general, when the government does a budget where they're putting more money into the economy than they're taking out of the economy through taxation, that has a net positive economic effect on the society. And one of the things that is interesting about this ICE discussion, right? I see a lot of people vilifying the people who sign up to be part of ICE. And I want to take a moment to just note that I don't blame these people joining up for ICE. My gosh, it's a $50,000 bonus that DHS is offering to people to sign up. And I want you to just think about our economic system and how corporations have essentially concentrated wealth in this country, limited economic opportunities for people. So you have all these disaffected young men who can no longer provide for a family, right? We had a middle class just a generation ago that could provide for a family of three, right? Or, three kids, mom and pop and a family of three, 50, 75 years ago, one income could have supported that. That's and had a middle class lifestyle. For a while, two incomes could support that. But now we're getting to a point where people can't even make ends meet, even with both parents working. So I do not blame people signing up to join this. And I don't think it's a coincidence that messaging has been done to these disaffected people, the ones that don't have good economic opportunity, don't have a chance to break into the middle class. They've been told, well, it's because of immigrants. Right. It's because, the reason that you're not making as much money as you should is because of immigrants. Nobody talks about the fact that the people who employ those immigrants and suppress those wages, that's the capital class. That's the C-suites of corporations who make a judgment that they're like, that corporations actually advertise down in Latin America.
Oh, yeah.
Come to the United States, right? Yeah. Come legally or illegally, whatever, just come so that they can suppress the wages for people. So then you have all of these, and I'll just say men because I think the vast majority of ICE agents are men.
Sure.
These young men don't have good economic opportunity.
Yeah.
And then the government starts dangling $50,000 checks in front of them.
Yeah.
And they're like, of course they're going to do it. Now, I think some of them do have bad motives. Like, I think some of them do, like, they're doing it because they have hatred for people that are, coming into this country. And so they are actually signing up for bad reasons. But I think the vast majority of them are just signing up because they need the money. And it gives them a chance to break into the middle class in a way that, now, if we actually had a fair economic system that provided middle class jobs to these people that doesn't involve shooting Americans, right? And shooting immigrants, I think that they wouldn't be signing up.
Yeah, I mean, when are you offered a $50,000 bonus for literally anything? When has someone said, you sign right here on the dotted line, $50K is going your way?
Unfortunately, lawyers at corporate law firms get that for going and taking a
Is that where it is now? Are there
more than that now? Like,
my God.
It was 50 to 100 grand when I was coming out of law school in 2009. like clerkship bonuses
Oh,
for
clerkship bonuses. I didn't
I'm talking
clerk,
about
so
clerkship.
I had okay,
No, no,
got it.
no. I'm
Yeah.
talking about, so you go and do the clerkship, right? But then you got a cushy, associate job waiting for you at Skadden Arps, or O'Melveny and Myers. Or I'm sorry for all my friends at those firms and all that. I'm not. It's all
They're
of
all
the
watching
corporate.
right now, Max.
It's
They're
all
all
the
watching. They're
corporate
like,
lawyer.
"Oh,
I hope they
Max."
do, man. Maybe it'll, like the Grinch at Christmas, it'll touch their heart and make it grow a few sizes bigger.
um, I wanna reflect on something you said that I think is really important, which is how this government, but also so many others, vilify immigrants
Yeah.
and ignore why people are desperate and ignore why people are so are struggling and scrambling. And I often talk about the construction industry, and what I say is, who's getting rich? Who is getting rich here? Because construction industry, this used to be a profession that provided hard but decent jobs,
Yep.
where if you worked hard, if you had some skill, had some hustle, maybe you climb up the ladder. A lot of people, in the 70s, 80s would talk about having a parent, a dad who worked construction and was able to, there's news articles about this, because we did some work on misclassification, which I'm about to talk about.
Yep.
People talking about, hey, look, my dad worked construction. He bought a house for us. He, got a little boat for us to go fishing on the weekends. These were good jobs. And I think a lot of people in our country look at these jobs now and they say, wait a second, why can't I work this job? Or, hey, I'm working this job and I can't even afford rent for just me, let alone my girlfriend, let alone my kid, right? And they say, this must be the fault of the person who is now in the job. And these are overwhelmingly Central American workers and workers from South America. And so what people need to understand is we didn't get here by those folks just showing up at the job site and saying, hey, you pay me less. How we got here in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s is by all those millionaire, centimillionaire, and some billionaire developers starting to pretend that their employees were not their employees, but were actually their independent contractors. Were actually owners of independent businesses who they did not have to pay overtime to, who they did not have to pay minimum wage to, who they did not have to pay into workers' compensation for, and who could pay these artificially high, so when you get the money, and taxes aren't out of it, they seem artificially high. And so at first people started saying, sure. But then people started realizing, wait a second, this is actually a raw deal. The other thing that hiring independent contractors facilitates is not having to check for immigration status. So when you hire an accountant, when you hire, someone to, fix your plumbing, right? Fix your sink. You don't say, hey, look, I got to look at your passport. Hey, look, I got to look at your social security card. No, you just hired that company and you pay that company. That's what these construction developers are doing. They're pretending their employees are 1099s or independent contractors, and then therefore being able, and that makes it easier to hire undocumented people.
Of course it does.
And so what this administration and so many administrations do, they don't go after the billionaire developer, the centimillionaire developer. They go after the person working that job, and they pretend that by removing that person, they're going to bring those jobs back. But unless those jobs are suddenly W-2 jobs, unless those jobs suddenly start paying out unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, overtime, minimum wage, they are going to be subsistence jobs, and they will not become good jobs.
So, Alvaro, in the 1990s, when there was, under the Clinton administration, when there was all this effort to try to do immigration reform to the United States, there was actually a proposal. There was a part of the bill that was to provide employer liability for hiring undocumented workers, right? And I think if you just think about the supply and demand aspect of immigration and how it goes, that would have, not ended illegal immigration, right? But it certainly would have mitigated illegal immigration into the United States if we held employers responsible. But guess what? Huge lobbying effort. Huge lobbying effort to get that out of the immigration reform bill of the 1990s. And so what you have is this situation where we vilify the immigrants. I once had a drink with a guy at a bar that, he was just a blue collar worker sitting next to me. And, he started railing about immigrants and how they were suppressing his wages.
Yeah.
And I had a really just heart to heart conversation with him. I said, think about that. I go, does he have a family? Or
Right.
do these people have, and he goes, yeah, they're sending all their money back to Mexico and all that. And I go, well, let me ask you this. Do you blame them for trying to make a living for their family? And he's like, well, no. And I go, but let me ask you this. Have you ever thought to blame the guy who hired that illegal immigrant? And it was like almost like a light bulb went off in his head. And he's like, yeah, you're right. And so I think we have this situation where it is once again the capital class who is creating the problems in our society and then asking us to blame the other people who are suffering under this economic system rather than blaming them.
The other thing that for everyone tuning in, we're trying to provide, Max and I are trying to provide some context for how we got to this place where the shooting occurred in Minneapolis. And look, you're going to get all these analysis breaking down frame by frame, people offering different opinions as to who did what, who was wrong. But we're trying to point out like how we got to the situation where that happened. And here's the other thing, I want to point out, which is whatever you think about what happened on that street, zoom out a tiny bit to look at all the other things that are happening on all the other streets. And so, in the last 24 hours, in addition to the death of Ms. Good, you had 2 people shot in Portland by federal officers. You've had videos come out, a pretty stunning video. And frankly, for me, it's just as important, Max, as the video of the horrific shooting in Minneapolis, where there's someone on the sidewalk in Minneapolis, and you see cars pull out, and you see the big Suburbans and Ford, F-350s, pull out of this alleyway. And then the person's recording, and this car, this Suburban, I think it is, pulls up, and the agent just sticks out pepper spray, sprays the person recording, and then leaves. And like, I think there's an expression, it's like a self-proving video. Like you can see this person isn't harassing anybody, isn't obstructing any.
I think they were like blowing whistles or something, like
right.
But they were making
they're not illegal to blow whistles.
They were exercising their First Amendment right.
Exactly. And but like the agent in the car did not have enough time to fully appreciate what this person was doing. Just sprays that person in the face. You watched a video where there was an agent just unholstered his sidearm and just was pointing
at protesters.
Right. And so this is the kind of
it's the power structure. It's like it's showing it's like we have the power, you don't. But so get back in line.
Here's the thing that I want to point out, that I want everyone, whatever you think about what's happening, to think about, which is what Max and I did for years. We were both in law enforcement. Okay, Max was in law enforcement at the Iowa Assisting Attorney General's office. We together were in law enforcement at the Federal Trade Commission. And it was not our job to go after people who were in the country illegally. It was our job to go after the billionaire companies that were trying to corner the market on cancer medicine so they could jack up the price on it, to go after the Martin Shkreli's of the world that are buying up orphan drugs and jacking up the price on them, to go after the Fortune 10 companies, the Fortune 20 companies that trick you into paying more and more and more, sometimes unwittingly. We're going after the companies that are price gouging you. We're going after the companies that were gobbling each other up so they could charge more for milk and eggs. We're going after the companies that are screwing you. That was our job. And breaking the law, because there's lots of companies that screw you, and there's a subset that breaks the law. And what I want everyone to understand is how those companies are treated. Because what I'm about to describe, none of it's...
We don't pepper spray the CEO?
Yeah, we Can you, yeah. Well, here's the thing. I would have to pepper spray him or her through a Zoom. Okay?
Well, no,
right?
actually, through their lawyers and economists, who are the ones who
Through a Zoom with their lawyers and economists. Okay, because this is what it looks like when you're investigating a company that allegedly or appears to have defrauded the American people of billions of dollars. This is what it looks like, everyone. Okay? When you are investigating in federal law enforcement a company that has defrauded you of hundreds of millions of billions of dollars, the American people, this is what it looks like. It may start with what's called a voluntary access letter. This is a kind of mean letter that your lawyers get
that
says,
FTC
"Hey,
really loves that, right?
this is
Please
I'm not
give us
I'm not gonna comment on that." They send these letters because this is Democrat and Republican. So I have my issues with this current FTC, right? But this is
well, there are no Democrats on the current FTC.
Very good point. So this is a Republican FTC, but Democrat and Republican FTC and federal law enforcement, civil law enforcement in general, it starts with a kind of angry letter that says, "Hey, we're worried about some conduct. Would you please voluntarily agree to submit some documents to us?" And then, if their lawyers say, "Go pound sand," we send them a meaner letter saying, by law,
sir, can we have a
well,
little
no,
bit
this
more?
this one says you have to send us these documents.
Well, that's
a subpoena, right? That's a CID, a civil investigative demand. Then what happens is not that the CEO calls you, is not that, you just start immediately getting those documents. What happens, my friends, is if you are a Fortune 100 company, your, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million a year lawyers get on the phone with our, $120,000 a year lawyer, or our, $90,000 a year paralegal, right? And they start saying, "Hey, you asked for a lot of documents. Let's set up a Zoom for next Wednesday at 2 p.m. to talk about your kind of unreasonable demand." And then our lawyers have to negotiate with them to talk about what documents this company, who we think probably broke the law to defraud people of millions upon millions of dollars, regular people, millions, but we have to negotiate with them to get their documents. Then it takes often months for those documents to actually be sent. And then because our agencies have been systematically underfunded by Republican first and then Democratic, presidencies alike, it takes our, paralegals, our lawyers, months to review those documents. But then when we think there's been a law violation, it is standard practice to get those corporate lawyers on the phone to say, "This is exactly how we think you broke the law," right? And in certain circumstances, and again, standard practices, that some of these companies will actually get copies of the complaints that we plan to file. The complaint is the actual document that we will file in federal court accusing someone to break the law. The corporate lawyers for these companies literally get, verbatim, page after page PDF of this is what we think we're going to file. And again, folks, this is standard practice, Democratic and Republican administration alike. And then there's a meeting with the bureau director head. Then there's the meeting with the shop head. There's the meeting with the bureau director head. Then there's the meeting between 3 to 5 commissioners. And all of that happens before we sue you in federal court for trying to, corner the market on a cancer test, to jack up the price on Americans, for defrauding people through some kind of fraudulent scheme of tens of millions of dollars. In the case of Amazon, we allege defrauding the American people of cheating the American people out of $1.5 billion by making it impossibly easy to accidentally subscribe to Prime and impossibly hard to get out of it. All right, so contrast that to the pictures of people getting pepper sprayed in the face, of people having guns pointed in their face, of this poor woman getting shot in this panic on the streets of Minneapolis. It is two systems of justice, and it does not make sense.
And can I point out, the Constitution, the Founding Fathers, when they actually created the legal system of this country, they were concerned about that protester potentially getting pepper sprayed in the face by the government. They were not ever concerned about a corporation. In fact, the revolution was partly motivated by the power that corporations had over the colonies. The East India Trade Company, that they and so the idea the founding fathers had no there's nothing in the Constitution that
Yeah.
provides for corporations. That's all a creation of state law. And so the idea that we have now given special rights to corporations,
Right.
that they get a red carpet treatment when they've committed wrongdoing, but we pepper spray the people that the Constitution was intended to protect, we have gone wrong as a society.
Yeah.
And so I think, can I transition into
Yeah.
Venezuela? Because we
Let's
got
do
probably
it. Let's
about
do it.
15 minutes
Yeah.
left
Yeah. Yeah.
here. Um, so I think we have a major issue when corporations, when government, I'm sorry, starts working for the benefit of corporations rather than for the people. Alvaro talked about that a little bit in relation to funding decisions that we make as it relates to ICE. But I want to give just a little bit of history of Venezuela. And like, I am not a scholar of Latin American history by any means. I am not. But I will say this, that in my limited study of Latin America, I've seen a very common trend where the United States intervenes in democratic elections. And like, I'm not going to say Venezuela was a democratic election that put Maduro
No.
in
No.
the
No. He
office.
stole
There
an
you go.
election.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
I like, but I'm saying there have been very many instances where democratically elected socialists in Latin America, that the United States has intervened in those countries because of nationalization of American corporations' interests.
Yeah.
So Chile is a perfect example of
Yeah.
this. That Salvador Allende was democratically elected as a socialist. He nationalized basically resources in Chile were being taken out by American, the country was being exploited by American corporations. Allende was elected by the people to try to nationalize, keep those resources, for the benefit of the Chilean people. And what happened? The CIA intervened in that country to install a military dictator to basically give that property back to American corporations. And what I think we're seeing in Venezuela is a very similar scenario that's playing out because back in the 1970s, Venezuela actually, nationalized its oil
Yeah.
industry. There was a rolling back of that nationalization in the 1990s. It was called Open Oil, was the program that essentially invited, foreign companies to come in and invest to help develop, the infrastructure of Venezuela oil extraction. Companies like ExxonMobil got in there. But then Chavez, Victor, no, not Hugo Chavez, sorry. Hugo Chavez was elected a socialist. He wanted to roll back. A lot of people think that he nationalized the Venezuelan oil, but he didn't. He just was rolling back the open oil policies of the previous administrations, making rules that required that like 51% of any venture had to be owned by the Venezuelan government, the Venezuelan oil company, which is a
PDVSA.
VDSA, the
PDVSA.
Venezuelan oil venture. So now we have a situation where, and I want to be clear, I'm not necessarily certain that corporations in America uh, pushed for the ouster of Maduro, right? I mean, I certainly would imagine that some people at oil companies in the United States saw some strategic advantage to, having a more open Venezuelan oil market. But what is pretty clear at this point in time is that the government was consulting with these companies before the Maduro extraction. That the government was actually giving like front row seats of like, hey, this is what we're going to do. Congress wasn't consulted. The Constitution requires that for military action, to happen in foreign countries, like Congress has to be consulted. And when now it's like, so who's actually running the country? Is it our Congress that's, elected by the people of the United States, or is it, corporations that they're able, and then just one last thing I want to note about this situation with, Trump has said he wants to run Venezuelan oil or have America run it. And he's, inviting these companies to get involved. I saw that one company has already received a license to go down there and
Oh,
do
is
the
that? I
business.
missed that. Who was that?
Yeah, I can't remember what the name of that company was. I'd have to look it up here. But that, you know, a lot of oil companies have noted that, well, if we're going to go develop it, we're going to need government guarantees. We're
Right.
going to need, so it's like one of those situations where it's like if you think that the private market does so much better than government run oil and all that,
Yeah.
why is it that our American companies are asking for essentially a bailout? They're asking for
Yeah.
subsidies from the American taxpayer in order to go down and do this. Last thing I'll mention, Alvaro, and I'll turn it over to you because obviously coming from Latin America, I'm sure you have lots of thoughts on
I got
this
some
issue.
thoughts. I got some thoughts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lots of
Go ahead.
thoughts.
No. Take your time, man. Yeah.
It's a is the Well, I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Yeah, no. I'm going to turn it over to you and then I might have some thoughts on what you say.
Yeah. So first things first, I don't understand the commercial element of this because you are exactly right. The president has said openly, we talked to the oil companies before doing this, right? Rather than Congress. And in fact, you have some people in Congress alleging that they were lied to about this. But the very weird thing about this is that a lot of the oil companies are saying like, we don't want to go in, because oil's not that lucrative right now. The price is pretty low. The nature of the Venezuelan crude is that it requires kind of special refineries that are outfitted to process what is, my understanding, a very heavy crude.
Viscous.
And the viscous, that's a good word, viscous. And so the Venezuelan oil infrastructure is very degraded.
Yeah.
And so that's why you have these companies saying, hey,
can we know just because I mean I've seen a lot of reports. It's like, oh, it's because of corruption and all of that the oil is, or that the infrastructure is degraded. And that's absolutely true. Like that Maduro was like, I mean, both Chavez and Maduro were basically criminals and,
basically, absolutely criminals. Yeah.
Corrupting the system for the benefit of their friends and all that.
Yeah.
But also we have to mention U.S. sanctions.
Right.
Because of Hugo Chavez's, reversal of the open oil, that's, the United States started sanctioning their oil production. And so they basically lost a lot of the income that they had to develop that infrastructure. Just wanted to note that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I don't understand it. I mean, clearly they're trying to do something for the oil companies. I think the money may be in some of these more Wall Street financial types that immediately said right after the seizure of Maduro and his wife, "Hey, yeah, we're planning down a trip in March." And I think there was like a former bundler for the Vice President Harris, talking about that. Someone named Mr. Myers, in the Wall Street Journal, and it is. So I don't understand the money, but here is what I know.
Well, anytime you open up a country and take away control, like it's
great
colonization and exploitation.
Right.
It's made money throughout history.
But like I will just say I don't fully understand what the path to money is here. I don't contest that it's there, and I don't contest that this administration astonishingly has just openly said we're here to make money, right? Effectively. But here is what I do know is that this is not, and this is something you've been talking about, this is not for the American people.
Right. I'll just say it's for strategic United States global interests, right?
Whatever that is, bundle that up and let me tell you how. I mean, look, let me tell you the surreal position that I am in, and that a lot of other people like me. So I was born in Peru, came here when I was 5. So a lot of like immigrants, first generation people who have family in Latin America. I've got a cousin chat. It's called the Primos chat, on WhatsApp, and it is just
primo means cousin in Spanish.
I think our listeners hopefully are get that.
Yo hablo un poquito español.
Thank you for clarifying, Max. But
with my Iowa Spanish education.
Hey,
actually, now Spanish is spoken widely in Iowa. So
there we go. But it's joyous, because Maduro was a criminal. It is a criminal. He killed people who disagreed with him.
Oppressed free expression across the board.
Yeah, but like he murdered people who who opposed him in his country, and a lot of people say oppressed free speech. He killed people who disagreed with him.
Yep.
And he was corrupt.
Bad
He is a
guy.
criminal, and he was, Latin America's Saddam Hussein in many ways.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing that I'll share, which I haven't shared anywhere else. So I actually had the misfortune of having to go to Chavez's Venezuela in 2008, 2009.
Wow.
So I was at one of those corporate law firms you're talking about, and I can't say too much. But we had a client, and for that client, we needed to go down to Venezuela. And what happened was, I was one of the very few native Spanish speakers. And so even though I was super junior, I got tapped on the shoulder and I was like, "Hey, buddy, you're taking a flight to Venezuela." And I was kind of like a glorified translator, to be honest with you. But so I know I don't look like an intrepid traveler, but like when I was in my 20s, I know how I look like. I'm self-aware. But when I was in my 20s, I have actually been to most countries in Latin America, and I actually really prided myself on like going everywhere, on traveling alone, on drinking the water everywhere I went, and like the whatever microbes I had from Peru when I came when I was 5 are still alive, and so I
Yeah.
don't really get sick anywhere. Didn't
Never
I'm pretty sure
underestimate the human biome.
the human biome. I'm pretty sure now, like Suburbia Alvaro would like very much have a different experience, but like so I've been to most parts of most countries in Latin America, and so when I went to Venezuela, Max, when I was probably 25, 26. I was like, oh, like I'll just go everywhere. Amazing. Like I've never been in a country with a dictator. Like this is going to be awesome. Now, been to 2 countries with dictators. But so so I go, Max, and immediately it is a different. It's like a
Yeah.
failed state. I go and we get picked up in an armored car, and the driver has been like trained in evasive driving, etc. And like at first I was like, this is my law firm just being ridiculous. Like there's no need for this. We get to the hotel, and this is in Caracas, and I say, well, I want to go walk around. I'm going to go get a drink or something. It's like 10 o'clock. We just got out of a meeting. It wasn't even. It was like 8 or 9. It was like just evening on a weeknight in Caracas. And I was like, well, let me go get a drink. Let's go see what it's like here. And so I start to walk out of the hotel, and hotel security, having no idea about my law firm, was just like, "Where are you going, sir?" And I was like, "I am trying to go, to go get a drink, to go hang out, go check out." And then they look at me and they point out the window and they said, "Sir, one of our guests was just shot last night right there." And it was like literally 7 feet from the door of this fancy hotel where my law firm put me up at. And I was like, what happened? And they said, well, he just got robbed. This guy just got robbed, got shot.
What year was
And
this? Just out of
this was
curiosity.
2008, 2009.
Yeah.
I think it was 2008. And then sure, like the level, but the really surreal experience, Max, was and this was petty crime. This was not the regime. What happens is there's a lot of
Yeah.
hungry people in Minnesota, desperate people in Minnesota. Some of them turn to,
Minnesota or Venezuela?
did I say Minnesota?
You did.
Damn. There are actually sadly
Well,
a lot
there's
of hungry people in Minnesota,
too.
but Venezuela, there's people who don't have enough calories, to and who are fleeing to other countries, including Peru, where my family's at, Colombia, where my family's at, Argentina, where I have family, but anyways, the really surreal experience was we had a meeting at a restaurant. And so I was like really excited about this meeting because we'd just been in these like heavily secured hotels all this time. So we get in our armored car and we start driving to this restaurant. And the driver turns on the radio and it's Hugo Chavez. And I was like, and he like starts to turn on some music. Because he's like, I don't want to listen to this. And so he starts, and I say, no, like this, I've never listened to a speech from a dictator, on the radio. Like, let me listen to this. And I'd heard about Fidel Castro's speeches going for like 5 hours, and Hugo Chavez was very much in the mold of Fidel Castro. So I was like, no, 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 please play this. And he's like, all right, man, whatever.
He's
Leaves it
rolling
playing.
his eyes at you. He's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
stupid American.
Leaves it playing. So Max, like, Hugo Chavez is talking, and he's talking for like 10 minutes, talking 15 minutes, talking about 30 minutes. Around minute 35, I'm like, all right, dude, I got it. I got it. You know, just change the channel. Let's listen to something else. You know, let's listen, choose another station. And he turns at me and he goes, oh, I'll play another station for you. And he turns the dial, and it's like, en este país, blah, 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 blah. En este país, estamos hablando, en este país. Every single station is playing Hugo Chavez. And that was the moment where I was like, I am in an armored car because there is no security. And I'm listening to the radio, and every single radio station is playing hour 3 or 4 of an Hugo Chavez speech. This is what it's like to live in a dictatorship. And I don't think I was there when people are getting murdered because they disagreed with the government. Maybe I was, and I just wasn't focused on it. But like, this is the regime that was just deposed, and this is why there are so many people across Latin America and my cousins.
But it hasn't deposed the regime.
It hasn't deposed the regime.
So
go ahead, and then but actually let me complete this thought, which is, here's the thing: my cousins don't pay taxes, okay, in the United States. My cousins live across Latin America, and so while this may have been a good thing for the the people of Venezuela, like just the Maduro leaving power. And I'm not going to talk about like what happens a year or 2 or 3 from now, when, as we've seen from Iraq, as we've seen from Libya, as we've seen some of these other countries, Chile,
like Pinochet, like they opened it up from the evil socialist Allende, and people started disappearing.
But here's the thing: like, here's what I know: the last dictator we deposed, the United States, moving past Gaddafi, even Saddam Hussein. I grew up. And now am friends with a generation of guys and men and women, although all the friends that I have that have PTSD are all men who have PTSD because of what happened in Iraq and their repeated deployments. You grown men, extraordinary people who have crippling disabilities, lost limbs. I don't know anyone with lost limbs, but I'm just talking. I have more than one male friend with PTSD because of Iraq. And this is a generation of people. And you have, 5 or 10,000 Americans who died in Iraq. And what for? For nothing. For nothing. You had defense contractors that got exorbitantly wealthy.
Yep.
You had George W. Bush, who got reelected. But what did the American people get from taking down this horrific, murderous dictator Saddam Hussein? Absolutely nothing.
Or Afghanistan. You can use
Afghanistan, but look, Afghanistan was after September 11th, and I was opposed to it at the time, but I understand why this country went in. But yes, staying there for 20 years and sending wave after wave after wave of young American to that country where it was going nowhere, it got us nothing. And so when I hear President Trump say, we're going to run this country, right? We're going to rebuild the infrastructure of this country. It's like, rebuild this infrastructure.
Yeah.
And there's no running of that.
It goes back to those moral choices of a budget,
right?
Like, it's like there's an opportunity cost that comes from putting our taxpayer dollars towards a foreign, a foreign country, right? Versus putting those dollars into here. But the other thing that I just wanted to note, Alvaro, is it's like I have friends from Venezuela. I'm very familiar with the Chavez. It's like the real problem is absolute power.
Yep.
Right. That's why everybody should be just totally frightened of the way that Trump is trying to consolidate power in the United States. Right. What always made the United States provide a maximum amount of liberty, or at least what we believe to be a maximum amount of liberty, was checks and balances on power. So what did Chavez do when he was democratically elected? He started to remove checks and balances in the Venezuelan government, right? What I am concerned about with, because it's what's the old saying? It's like a known devil is better than an unknown devil, because it's like,
The devil,
look, and it like one of the biggest problems facing Venezuelan oil was corruption,
Mm,
right? But how is it any less corrupt for American companies to go in there and start extracting the oil, removing all those profits from the oil and sending it to America,
right.
as opposed to having it work for the benefit of the Venezuelan people?
Hmm.
And look, I'm a capitalist, but I do believe that there are certain markets that it makes sense for the people to have a shared interest in. I always cite healthcare, transportation,
Right.
education.
Utilities. Right.
There are certain types of markets where we need to make sure that the markets work to the
Yeah.
benefit of the people as
Yeah.
opposed to the benefits of private interests. So when I mean, I have no doubt that crime in Venezuela will continue to be an issue
Yeah.
even under American, whatever running the country.
Yeah.
Like, because of the fact, as long as the benefits of the natural resources of the country do not revert back to the people, right? The people will be unsatisfied. The people will
Mm,
be angry, and the people will be desperate. And it's that
yeah.
desperation that leads to crime. And
Yeah.
you can have desperation under a socialist communist system. You can have desperation under a dictatorship. You can have desperation under a quote unquote democracy like we have in America. So I guess the biggest question is just, what is the government's role? Is the
Yeah.
government's role to enrich private interests, or is the government's role to make sure that the people have the resources that they need to be happy?
Yeah. The To point out just a couple things, like it would be one thing if uh, um, the Maduro, the Chavista regime were gone, right?
Yeah.
And even then, we'd have the Iraq problem, we'd have the
Yeah.
Gaddafi problem, we'd have we'd have those problems, but it's not gone. Delcy Rodriguez is the head of the government.
Yeah.
The other thing that doesn't compute to me is people say, oh, and I heard this from one of my cousins, who's more like a brother, a guy I love. He said, well, we can't have Venezuela being run by China and Russia. And here's the thing that people need to understand. Before the illegal seizure of Maduro, Maduro said to Trump, whatever you want, you will get. All right, and also it's like I think it's like 5% of China's oil comes from Venezuela, and so it's not like there is this massive, geopolitical tilt like Cuba, during the Bay of Pigs or during all. By the way, I'm not supporting that, but I'm saying
No.
it's not like there were Russian nukes headed to Venezuela or something like that. The reasoning for this is very unclear to me, but I just know, quote unquote, running a country that that is basically collapsed, that looks a lot like Vietnam in terms of its terrain, in terms of the complexity
Oh, I,
of
I
it.
forgot about the terrain issue.
The
Yeah.
terrain, like there are paramilitaries, there are some actual cartels in this country, not the cartel del Sol or whatever, this fake cartel that they had to stand down and pretend wasn't there's all this surreal stuff happening. If so I think there's two paths here. There's the path where, and frankly this may be the most likely path, where Trump takes out Maduro, leaves in Rodriguez, and just says, like, you're going to do X and Y and Z with your oil, you're going to do X and Y and Z with your rare earths, and leaves it at that. And honestly, in this terrible situation, for the American people, that may be the best outcome, just like where he does that. There's another one where he's serious about running the country. And he actually tries to do the things he said, which is, oh, we're going to rebuild X and Y. We're going to run the country. And I don't see how that doesn't require boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that is
because think of all the Maduro supporters. I'm not saying
yes,
that they
right,
won the
right,
election. Like,
right,
I don't
right,
think the election results are trustworthy.
right.
But there are certainly people who, one,
Yeah,
financially benefit from that regime,
Yeah.
and there are very rabid supporters who
Yeah.
believe that Maduro and Chavez, the Chavistas, right, that they were benefiting from the system.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the idea that they wouldn't have problems with an American occupation
Yeah.
to,
It's
even if it's like whatever
right.
propaganda you throw out that like this is for your benefit. I mean, people can see through that.
And this is it's just a hellish if we actually try to run the country the way the president is describing it, this is a hellish outcome for the men and women of our military. It is
Absolutely.
completely hellish. And here's the other thing is that it costs money. All right, like right now, I live in suburban Maryland. We up till recently had schools in Baltimore that would close on days that were too hot because we couldn't pay for air conditioning. There are, to this day, for a complicated set of reasons, mostly having to do with a lack of money, there are schools in New Mexico that run 4 days a week as opposed to 5 days a week. There are literally people right now because of these healthcare, the taking away these healthcare subsidies, who have cancer treatments that they cannot afford anymore because they don't have money. And here we are throwing, billions and billions of dollars at this military escapade in Venezuela, and it does not make sense. It will not make our country better. Even if you believe these ideas about oil, all of this was
Strategic
offered,
position in the world, global economy,
right?
and all of that. Even if you
All
buy
of it
into
was
that,
offered to Donald Trump by Maduro, and he did not take it. What I think he wanted was a show of force. I think he is clearly wants a Nobel Peace Prize of some sort, and I'm serious. So he complained that Machado got the prize,
which was,
implying,
I mean, that was such a, I mean,
so much so that she came back and went on air to be like, I will be willing to give it to President Trump. So he clearly wants a Nobel Peace Prize.
also,
And
but he
also,
got the Peace Prize because that
yes,
that
which
wonderful
we all know is the
non-corrupt
gold
organization.
standard.
FIFA.
That's right. That's right. Oh God. But so I think he wanted to appease the kind of Miami neocons, and the Miami Miami elites that look, I can do peace over here too. I can do great things for you over here too. I kind of think that's what's at play. And now they're going to make as much money as humanly possible. But the hilarious thing is that even like the enriching, even the grift is incompetent because it sounds like they went to the oil companies before Congress and said like, hey, if we go in, you want to get in on this? And all the oil companies were like, fuck no. Are you joking? I don't want to go in there. But they're like, we're going in anyways. And so I think that's where we are. And one day the real history will come out. But go ahead.
Can I just point out too, though, this is so much part. Like I'm a history student. I love history, and we got to understand it. This is colonialism. This is imperialism. It all goes back to a government of one country thinking that they have a benefit coming from owning, occupying, controlling another country.
Yeah.
And I just, I feel like we should have learned over the last 20 years the costs that come with this. Not only the direct cost to the opportunity cost in America of where our taxpayer dollars are going.
Yeah.
But also the cost to our reputation around the world. Nobody likes an imperialist. Look throughout it, and like when Rome was imperial, they fell. When Britain was imperial, their empire fell eventually, right? And the more that America tries to be imperialist, we will fall too. China is trying to be imperialist now, and I think that's part of the motivation of this, right? It's just that China is showing real empire aspirations.
I mean, but this is a gift. This is a gift to Xi
China?
Jinping because he'll be like, oh, you need to run, any country that's near you that you don't like. Oh,
well,
me too.
Yeah,
me too. There's this country that's actually very close to me, much closer to me than Venezuela is to you, that I kind of think I should run. And let me tell you, when there's no chips coming out of TSMC, that is a rough world for the auto industry in America. But you said something really important. And let me boil down, and then we should wrap and talk about
I
what's
think,
coming
yeah.
next for the fair fight. But like, for me, it's what this guy, our president, could have done. You know, this is a guy again who says, "Oh, you think it's illegal for me to seize this gun? I'm going to do it." You know, "Oh, you think, I
My
can't
morality,
fire,
my
I
morality
can't
will check
fire,
me.
I can't fire federal employees. Oh yeah, I'm going to do it." You know, "Oh, you think I can't, I can't put, ICE officers on the street to point guns at you and deport. I'm going to do it." This guy does whatever he wants. Imagine for a moment that he did that for people, who have cancer, who cannot pay the bills. Imagine he did that for the young family who has, two under two at home and cannot afford childcare and has to bring in their elderly, grandparent who themselves, is struggling with healthcare issues to care for people, or has to drop off the kids at the neighbor, or has to bring the kids with them to the interview, or to bring the kids with them to work. Imagine if this guy used that bull in China shop energy for all that stuff. What a world we would live in. And look, I have always been opposed to this guy. It's all public. I didn't vote for this guy. I wish he was not in power. But like, if he had applied this bull in a China shop energy to help the struggling people in this country, he probably would be achieving all the stuff that he wanted to achieve. I still think he's an authoritarian. I still think he treats the most vulnerable people in this country like garbage. And I think that honestly that's what I think. But like, what a different world the struggling people in our country would live in if he applied that bull in a China shop energy to them.
Well, not even him. Let's not even say him. What if Obama? What if Obama, who was elected on a promise of hope and change, utilized government, like maximized the power of the executive to try to help people, but instead he did the opposite? David Sirota has been pointing this out. Like, I think he's been having a lot of good conversation about this, but all of that hand wringing that Democrats did with kind of that neoliberal corporate mindset perspective, like, well, we can't push the envelope. We can't do this. We can't do that. We don't have the power to do that. Trump is showing that the president does have a lot of power. And look, and I consider myself a constitutionalist at my core and all of that. Like, I'm not saying that it's good to violate the Constitution to enact all of this stuff, but there are certainly power mechanisms in place that the president, that Congress, there was a time where, Democrats controlled Congress and they controlled the presidency. And they did an iota of what Trump has been doing with that same kind of power. And if we just think about how much different politics plays out in this country, like, we already saw an example of this in America of FDR doing this. FDR was in many ways kind of a predecessor to Trump. They're very similar in the ways they've just been, because he kind of was like, he's like, stop me. He's like, these are not, but he was doing it. He was doing it for the benefit of the American people. And look, and
he wasn't a demagogue. He wasn't an authoritarian demagogue.
No, and he did something that I think I wish more people, kind of who are fighting against corporate power would do, which is that he used Christian ethics, right, to really kind of promote, like, helping our neighbor. Like, he's like, the Bible commands us to help our neighbor. And but there's no doubt that his expansion of social programming set up the American middle class for the next 50 years. I would argue that his social programming that he did actually prepared us to enter into World War II. It expanded American manufacturing, expanded our capabilities in order to take on the Nazi power of Germany, right? And so, anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. I think that this is an important point, right? It's like, if power is going to be used by the government, should it be used to enrich the wealthy? Or should it be used to help the people?
Amen. Max, as we close out, let's talk about two things. Let's talk about how people can connect with us and ask questions of the show. So just, and then let's talk about, so Stu, on this, something happy that you're looking forward to, because we got to cleanse the timeline. Let's end on that note. But quickly, folks, so Max and I are spinning up a show that's inspired by car talk for the messed up economy. So you all remember Click and Clack, the Tapper brothers, operating out of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where you ask them your questions about your car. They answer your questions. They roast you a little bit, but they give you practical advice about this stuff. So we're creating a show. You're listening to it now, the Hangout version, but the episodes are for the Fair Fight with Alvaro and Max are going to be inspired by car talk. We're going to have experts on. You ask them questions that you get real answers. So the first two episodes are pilots, which we're spinning up right now. One has to do with being tracked at work. Your location tracking, recordings of your phone calls, scanning your fingerprint, your face, your body, your iris, the use of AI to tell you how fast to work. If you have questions about whether any of that is legal, record us, go to thefairfightpod.com today. Record that voice note today, because we're going to be recording with Jennifer Abruzzo next Wednesday, and we may be able to get your question answered. Also, Max is focused on an episode around what's American agriculture and why American farmers are getting screwed. And so if you have a question about that, send it today. Thank you, Mac. Look at that.
Look at that. I figured out how to do it.
You can go to thefairfightpod.com, or you can go to this, www.speakpipe.com/thefairfightpod. It's
really simple. You don't have to install anything on your computer. You just, speak a recording, and then I'll get your message. I'll get your question.
And a quick teaser for folks. So the first two episodes we're working on, one has to do with American agriculture. The other has to do with workplace surveillance. My hope is to do an episode where parents or teenagers can ask questions from one of the country's preeminent experts on social media and chatbots about the health effects of extended use of these technologies in the run-up. And this is a sad run-up to Valentine's Day, because sadly a lot of young people and adults are falling in love with these chatbots for real. They think they have sex with them. They think they marry them. They think they have children with them. And these are real things. This is not Her Part 2. Referring to the movie. So we hope to do that. And look, if you have an idea for a show we could do, send it in to ask@thefairfightpod.com. What Max and I are doing right now are just hangouts. We'll pop on live during drive time on Fridays to just talk about the issues
just like
of the
to
day.
hear ourselves talk, and
Guilty as charged, sadly. But
we want more engagement from you. Right? We want you.
We want clicks and eyeballs. We want and ear time. Please give us your clicks and eyeballs in your time.
I want substance. Like if you're in an industry, I just want clicks
and eyeballs in your time.
I want substance. If you're in an industry,
I want to get people addicted to the show, Max.
Affected. I don't want people addicted
to the show. I want them just clicking, and then we can advertise them, and we can become billionaires.
No.
All right.
And then I'll pay my taxes. I will pay my taxes.
Wait,
who's the guy? The wealth tax in California? Nvidia's CEO.
Oh yeah. Actually, give him credit. He was like, whatever, I'll pay it. Yeah, I'll pay it.
And, Warren Buffett. Like, I got a lot of problems with Berkshire Hathaway.
Right,
because Warren Buffett, kind of had this idea of the moat and protecting from competition. Right. But he always said, he's like, I pay less in taxes than my secretary does. That's screwed up. Right. That's messed up. And it's like, I don't want to vilify all billionaires, right? Because but here's the deal. If you're a billionaire and you don't want to pay your taxes, you're damn right I'm going to vilify you. Right? You don't want to pay your fair share back into society. You don't want to help the people of our country, and not helping the people by providing them with a product. All right. I don't buy that is the way that you are supposed to help people. Be like Andrew Carnegie and give the vast majority of your wealth away for public libraries in this country. Yeah. Right. That's the type of billionaire that we want to have in this country. Otherwise, billionaires should not exist.
How about that for a rate? What are you looking forward to? What are you excited about?
I'm looking forward to doing the Charleston dance with my wife on Saturday night. We're gonna do a little. We're gonna learn how to do the Charleston. you know,
Ladies,
that's
ladies and gentlemen, Max is a newly married man, and so he's still in that phase, the honeymoon phase,
I mean,
where
once divorced and then
yeah,
remarried,
we
but
don't need to
you
talk
know,
about that. We don't need to talk about
but
that.
no, I've got the love of my
And
life.
so he is in
Amanda's,
the apple of the moment. But no, that's awesome.
yeah, no,
I'm a
I'm
very lucky guy too. I
looking
just don't dance
forward.
to Charleston with my wife, so I gotta tell Seema we gotta dance to Charleston now. But say more. Where are you guys going somewhere? Is there like a sock hop nearby?
Amanda's taking care of it all. She got us
Oh my
tickets, and
God.
yeah, we're doing it with a couple friend of ours that we're gonna, go and learn how to do the Charleston. And
Okay.
but it's great. Like with this group of friends, like we did over Christmas, we did like a 50s style dinner, a 50s
Yeah.
style holiday dinner, and all that. So there's,
Oh.
look, it's like, it's a little nostalgia, maybe
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
thinking back to the time when the middle class actually existed and hadn't been completely decimated by a billionaire
All right,
class.
no. Stop. Happy. All right. So my version of this actually had a good one. Seema and I are making lamb chops. But it's the Persian recipe. So we are 2 nights ago. So Seema chopped up the lamb chops and started the marinade. So the marinade is, and then I finished it. The marinade is yogurt, a zest of orange, onion, garlic, salt, cumin, and I feel like I'm missing a couple things.
You
But
know
it
what,
is what's that?
Alvaro?
Tell me.
I think we should post your lamb chop recipe on the website.
It's not mine. It's Najmi about
Oh.
Manglich's recipe, which is
Oh, okay.
the recipe. But let me tell you, these are going to be marinated 3 days. We got some family in town. I'm going to grill them up tonight. It's supposed to rain. So what I'm going to do, not just winter barbecue, which is my personal favorite because it feels like you're on vacation and it feels like you're kind of like cheating the universe by grilling. And so we're going to grill those up tonight and serve them out to our family who are in town. And what I may do is I may post the finished lamb chops today, and hopefully that gives people some measure
I
of
would
happiness
love
or just
I would love to see that.
jealousy.
As you know, I love lamb. I try to source
I
it
don't think I
locally
knew
from
that.
farms. Oh, I love lamb.
I mean, it is, yeah.
It's my favorite meat.
Really?
Oh yeah, like, and
I
I do
I
a
could
lamb
probably get
roast.
behind that.
No, I do leg of lamb roast.
Yeah?
I've got my kids to love it. Yeah, it's a great versatile meat. And you know what's so funny is outside of the United States, it's one of the staple meats of
That's right.
the world.
That's right.
And yet yeah. Anyway,
All
well,
right.
Alvaro, thanks so much. We went longer than
you.
we expected to.
We're going good. All good.
But yeah, please check us out at thefairfightpod.com and www.speakpipe.com/thefairfightpod.
And if you want to find out about our upcoming pilots, go to thefairfightpod.com and just send us your email. We'll make sure you find out about it first.
Everyone have a
All right, my
great
friends,
day
Have a great day.
and a
Hang
great
in there.
weekend.
Bye.